Thank you so much, George. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight, too. Let me tell you a little bit about Charles Stein. We have the pleasure of this meeting tonight. Charles Stein's work comprises a complexly integrated field of poems, prose reflections, translations, drawings, photographs, lectures, conversations, and performances. Born in 1944 in New York City, he is the author of 13 books of poetry, including Views from Tornado Island, From Mimir's Head, a verse translation of the Odyssey, a forthcoming translation of the Iliad, and the Hat-Rack Tree. His prose writings include A Vision of the Eleusinian Mysteries, Persephone Unveiled, a critical study of poet Charles Olson's use of the writing of C.G. Jung, The Secret of the Black Chrysanthemum, and a collaborative study with George Quasha of the work of Gary Hill, An Art of Limina, Gary Hill's works and writings. He holds a PhD in literature from the University of Connecticut at Storrs and lives with guitarist, choral director, and research historian Megan Hasty in Barrytown. Please welcome Charles Stein.
Thank you. I'm going to read and speak a little bit about the one work that I've done that has a rather explicit processual procedure in keeping with the context. It's when you are in a box, best observe the walls of the box. Views from Tornado Island is a series of really 13 different books. And I guess maybe I'll read the thing I wrote that says what it is, so I'll just do that first. The entire series speaks from a stock of some 26 characters, numinous objects, oddly configured abstractions, one for each letter of the English alphabet, which the author imagines as wildly heterological metonyms. If you don't know what those words mean, you could say wildly, displaying the emergence of all that comes to appear. In its own terms, the poem literally scries or conjures itself into existence and offers emergence as a figure for the productive generosity, as it were, of being. But the subjectivity of poetry and its obsession with its own nature, thereby, seems to flip. It is reality that solicits the meaning of poetry, not the other way around. Reality subsumes the very intuitions that it fosters, projecting itself and the writer and reader together onto an intransitive, that's another one of these, an intransitive itinerary of pondering, the exit from which can only be discovery itself. Number 3 from the 13th book of Views from Tornado Island, called Views from Tornado Island. The orb of incomprehensibility was the brain itself, cogitated Jaguar. The great ventriloquist put a spin on it. So what transpired in one's intelligence had a triple difficulty. The old hotel and its specially edited rattle out of Africa, hammerhead visible from afar, a blue bug on the rim of a cauldron almost at the door, the weirdlings knocking, that's more than 3, so that the thoughts which agitated the cauldron, not only were their provenance palpably dubitable, but the matters that they were thoughts about positively spidery. One kept a twin in the colonies. In combination therewith, one attained a quiet locus for an identity, the equation between this and that, a kind of comfort, if as well a lid were put on the cerebral gorge, whose qualities the ventriloquist determined by the utterance emitted. Out of ancient Africas he harbored one great stone, or was there a tower beyond the colonies where the twin sat, the place from which the missives were to broadcast across oblivion into the mind? The system of these 26 numinous objects, etc., was worked out slowly, and it's now almost 10 years since I started doing this. There are many different schools of productive poetry in which systems are used, in which the actual presence of the system is, in a sense, the subject of the poetry, or the content of the poetry, or the thing that the poetry is an illustration of, so that you get the system and then you can hear the system inside the poetry. That's not actually what I was interested in doing. I was interested in creating something like a magic stone that you could stare at, or that I could stare at, and in my interaction with it generate material which I hadn't actually anticipated beforehand. So basically what I had was these 26 words that were associated with the letters, and I would write out the title of the poem and then write down the list of the letters that are in the title of the poem in that sequence, and construct a poem in which I would improvise, jumping from one to the next until I came to the end. And since the phrases in the titles didn't exhaust all the letters of the alphabet, when I had finished, I would go back into what I had written, pick out words that had the letters I hadn't used, assign to them their images, names, objects, and so forth, and continue until I had exhausted all the letters of the alphabet. That would comprise a section of a poem. Next thing I do is change the attributions of the letters to the words one letter. So what was A becomes B, B becomes C, C becomes D, and so forth, and then do the whole thing again. The consequences is that the frequency with which the words repeat differ because they represent different letters of the alphabet. So what I'm going to do is read to you the list of the words that are functioning in this poem, and then I'll go on and read a continuous series of a few of the pieces. Actually, by the time I got to the 13th book, I wasn't using the individual words as such, but it was something like each one of the words became its own semantic field. That is, say, it could have grammatical variants of the same words, or synonyms, or words that were associated with them. So the list for this particular book was wrench boy, cat boy. Wrench boy is a kind of character that appears throughout the text as a kind of something between a trickster and like Melville's Ishmael or something, a somewhat neutral but magical character. And at a certain point, he turns into a cat, so it's wrench boy or cat boy. Twist, turn, spiral, torque, torsion. That would be B. C was place. D was hammerhead. Hammerhead is another character who is a kind of, if you know Blake, a kind of Eurozenic character. He's a character who's always trying to kind of nail things down. E, change. F, crystal. G, ventriloquist. And in this one, I almost would call this book the Book of the Ventriloquist. Somehow a ventriloquist who requires his own ventriloquist, and the ventriloquist, etc. All the changes are rung on that situation. H was violet or jacinth. Violet is a kind of Venusian figure. Sometimes she's a flower, sometimes it's just a flower, sometimes it's the color, sometimes it's all kinds of other associations. Then I is lattice, matrix, graph, weave, or web. Another thing about this text is that it webs together, weaves together, spins together a multiplicity of different, what would be conventional symbolic systems. So if you think of either religious systems or mythological systems, which generally have some particular figures that will stand for an overriding sense of reality. The way this text works is by multiplying those overriding systems and setting them into reaction with and around and through each other, so that they're continuously changing into each other. There are different kinds of voices that are rising that have different activity in relationship to the symbolic system that they find themselves in. And one of them is the idea of a matrix or a lattice, which of course is like the image for the way the poem itself is being produced, that there's a kind of matrix out of which the text is emerging. And the word matrix has mathematical meaning, the word lattice has mathematical meanings, but they kind of jumble against each other in different ways. Then tower, mountain, hill, elevator, building. There, in this poem, there's a central figure is a tower that has a spiral staircase that's almost like an escalator, but it's going both ways at once. And it's simultaneously two tornadoes that are over the same spot that are spinning in opposite senses. Then there's a door. There's the word twin, double, pair, complement, inversion, simulacrum, syzygy. Syzygy is a kind of mysterious doubling. One sense of it would be that if you had like a transcendental angel that was your true self, you would be in syzygy with that angel. Coffer, pot, cup, cat's bowl, chalice, cauldron, bin, vat. That's M. N is melee, where I always used to pronounce it mealy, but when I started saying mealy, people thought it was kind of mealy. So melee. Melee is a character or else a condition that appears throughout. She's a kind of wild woman. Then there's channel, groove, tunnel, passage, funnel, tube, runnel, road, boulevard, path, creode, street, avenue. Those are different ways in which that figure appears. African rattle, bug, spider, mole. African rattle is its own thing. Bug, spider, mole, tick, wastrel, snake, serpent, arachnid. Then wastrel, vagabond, pariah, outcast, slattern, urchin, pauper, hobo, bum, wanderer, nomad, drifter, nobody. S is black lake. T is jaguar. U is old hotel. V is ogre, giant, troll, android, monster, teratology, prodigy. W is egg, zygote, embryo, fetus, spring, larva, nymph. X is long river or deep storage. Y, colony, community, collective, village, commune, encampment, hamlet, city, town, country, gnome, precinct, arrondissement. And Z is elf, molecule, protozoa, virus, bacterium, dwarf, sprite, pixie, leprechaun, dybbuk. So in a sense, that's the whole poem. You've got the system, and if you could jumble them up and put them next together, and imagine your mind moving from one to the next, you get the actual picture of the generation of these texts. It's impossible to. They have a kind of argument or almost philosophical discourse that's happening in them, and the main thing that you have to do in order to sort of be with it is to allow it to move. And the problem is that you get caught at a certain point where you actually start thinking the thing that I'm saying, and then you said, "Shit, where did that go?" I thought I understood it, and. All right, so I'm just gonna read a series of them for a few minutes, and so you get a sense of how they move. And there's no particular logic for why I'm reading these in this sequence. This is the 8th one, and it's called "The Door to the River, the Matter of Waters." If anybody knows the work of Willem de Kooning, there's a very wonderful painting of his called "The Door to the River" that's very mysterious, and it sort of suggests the whole. That's not the phrase that gets written through here. The phrase for every one of them is views from Tornado Island. If water dredge a channel, it establishes place. Long River essentially fluctuant, doesn't. If its essence is its channel, then absence is essence. You must have the water, but you must have both. If it travel through countryside in sunlight, moving like a checkered snake, or the twin of a checkered snake, it masters the colony with its own special thraldom. After a while, the native people grow used to it. They speak of it reverentially, but rarely look at it, except on its day, when a door appears to it, and Violet is the designee to open it, and Crystal assists her. The latter carries a jug to the water and waits for it to fill, and Violet holds the door open, and the whole village comes to it, and a voice fills the space from the darkness. The ventriloquist of the ventriloquist's ventriloquist, if it is Jaguar, steps into the light holding the black egg, and Violet makes mention of the last time everyone came out to celebrate Place herself. It was the little Blossom's twin. They had traded identities. Contrariwise, Jaguar is a constant. He can be ventriloquist. He never has one. His multiplicity shoulders another arrangement. He manages the egg. The door is the door to the river, and an indissoluble channel down which Long River carries its door. And Long River carries the source of distant intelligence, the voice on the wind, stored in a black pot. When the winds about the tornado island change, the weirdlings work through doubling. For each creature on the island, an indissoluble relationship is established and enforced by their ordinance and habit, but you cannot deduce the law from analysis of these performances. Jaguar discusses this assiduously with Hammerhead. No record in deep storage can be disinterred to assist them. Perhaps they consult the elves. Jaguar is inclined not to do this. Better dissolve to Black Lake and return on the waters of Long River. Long River wends through its Africas and brings report. There are giants at the source of it, and an abstract lattice with blanks you can fill if you have cause to do so. At the bottom of the pot there's a hole that connects to a channel, and it is sufficient to suggest of the river that oftentimes fills it that the flux runs through it is alive. The ventriloquist's interest is piqued. He seeks fit vehicles for his voices. Dummies and purchased politicos will not satisfy. His cauldron of candidates is always hungry. But he cannot pass through the door if the place at which his missives are to be delivered transmogrifies too egregiously. Violet is conciliatory. Her qualities appeal to Jaguar and do not agitate a melee. If place itself is its own truth, the cauldron calms down, but keeps its potential for portentous force and for ominous roiling. So we have our solution. The twist in apparent being, though not managed too assiduously by Jaguar, is cannily negotiated by him. The elves are in perpetual negotiation with Melee, sometimes tending to encourage her, sometimes apparently paralyzed, all neck deep in the sod. Jaguar, as sentinel, shares a nature with the door. That's why the old hotel, reliable old archetype, is liable to infinite changes. Jaguar is alert and steps aside to avoid the giant shadow, while Hammerhead steps right in and has to accept the sequelae. Skewed lattices. Maybe it'll help to say a couple of weird things here. One of the previous books is based on a phrase that's actually a koan from a Korean Zen system. We call it Choge system, which is really an original Korean Zen that's as old as Japanese Zen, and they have koans just like in the Zen system. And the koan was the mouse eats cat's food, but the cat's bowl is broken. And your mind, I can see everybody instantly. Your mind starts to do it, and that's the beginning of that particular koan. So I did an entire volume, 26 sections based on that. So the word the cat bowl has, if you had been reading this whole damn thing, would have this kind of enormous resonance of something like sometimes like a. It could be like the skull in various Tibetan practices where you make a skull cup that then becomes as big as the universe and you churn up magical substances to feed all beings. So this cat's bowl is not your cat's bowl. The cat's bowl, so this is called skewed lattices. There's something in here where I once got very interested in the way, in French philosophy, Michel Foucault and other people, they make a lot of the image of kind of an infinitely self-reflecting mirror. Like you put two mirrors, like in a casino, against each other, and they repeat forever. And they use that as a kind of a metaphor for a certain kind of self-reflective structure in language. But I noticed that if you had two mirrors, like say two pocket mirrors, which in the old days you could buy in 5-dime stores, which don't exist anymore, except the one in Rhinebeck that doesn't have the mirrors anymore. If you took the two mirrors and tried to do that, unless you actually put them absolutely right, if they're skewed a slight bit, they don't go infinitely. And according to how you skew it, you get a very interesting depth. So if it goes like 4 or 5 times rather than an infinite number of times, you get a space which is internally complex with self-reflections. And I for a while I was photographing, trying to find ways to photograph that kind of space. So this idea of a skewed lattice there's something at a certain point which... The cat's bowl was full of giant elves, bewildered naturally, having just arrived from their former condition, not diminutive merely, but up to their necks in the sod. The scene was quite a melee. What happened to that rich, loamy blanket that so lovingly quelled the longings of flesh? They inquired of each other with anguished fury. Above them loomed the watery fire tower, its crown aflame with torrents of water pouring from its windows. Or was it a fiery water tower, a massive fountain shooting from the top of it, its windows flaming? In any case, it housed the black egg as a kind of antic ballast. But you already know that. Stop correcting me. I know what I'm about, or if I don't, that's the point. Point, according to me, is perfectly excellent half-rhyme for don't. There is a lattice for every point in the lattice, and a skewed lattice for each point in that, plural that's, and so on down the rabbit hole, the skewing getting worse or improving, your choice, at each iteration of this recursion. Now, the point is, the ventriloquist establishes which iteration he must deliver his muffled missives from. He agreed to that when Hammerhead hired him, but nobody knows the key to correct the jaded skewing, so don't assume. The reason you have a door is to afford yourselves an alternative system. The reason you have a door is to afford yourself an alternative system of elsewheres to the ventriloquist's skewed lattices, to which he himself on occasion falls helpless victim, at which point he rings changes on his own condition, and nests full of chirping wieldlings hatch all over the island, and Jaguar has to send out avatars to put a stop to the ontic splittings, though of course they would come to a halt without such intervention, the iterative process not being perfectly mirrored, but critically skewed. The point is, the ventriloquist gets confused because the voices of the elves have gone basso, the reason he himself originally was required, you recall quite reasonably. not at all sonorities within his baffled repertory. And the looming tower, both fire and water, begins to twist because of its essentially double identity, and under the sway of its nature, everyone is a weirdling. The alternative system of elsewheres, however, will change all that. This is Jaguar's imperative. He opens a door onto another colony where giants are not bugs or anything else, but members of their own species, absolute and conformably normative. Violet has a twin that's an elf. When she grows prolifically on the other side of the door, the giants and bird-like weirdlings have all changed accommodatingly. And Lord Long River arranges things so that twinly elves are creatures of sweet delight, going about their self-appointed businesses in what would be a particularly zippity-doo-dah fashion were it not for the tower, which is always ponderous under its various elemental tonalities. Its business is to accumulate everyone else's accumulated business-like accumulations and to aver that this world is a colony, an outpost of ontological secondarity, and the presence of jocular giants and zealous jaguars does not ameliorate the underlying solemnity of the matter. Only Wrenchboy can do that. He has a twin that retwists the tower. An enormous field of African razzles is exquisitely placed so that their individual sonorities contribute to a single sound while remaining perfectly distinct when the giant weirdlings shake them. That's how it was after the new twist the rectified ventriloquist gave to his glottis. So the twin across the absence was able to relay just those perquisities, and the tower modulated its solemnity accordingly, if temporarily. I do not retract what I uttered about its solemnity. Nevertheless, this stable ontological condition corresponds to a single giant that is Tornado Island itself, across the channel from the old hotel. That is the stable configuration. I think I can count on that the singular giant is a twist in the twisting exigency of giants generally, don't you think? That image-wise, they resist volatile change? There is under such dispensation a door to Black Lake, where ravaged ventriloquists know restorative waters, and red-freckled cognitive melee undergoes a restorative twist. Paleontology. Right now, ontology, everybody knows that's the kind of the word of the month, right? Everybody knows the word ontology. Paleontology would be like paleoarchaeology or paleomusicology, the study of the ontology of pre-human people or pre-human people. Yeah, we have that idea, pre-human people. Paleontology would be very, very ancient ontologies. And it refers to something, it says now is twin time, and there's an actual kind of astrological reference here. You know that there is in astrology the idea of a sequence of ages that are dominated by each of the signs going back approximately 2,500 years, and so that the age of Aquarius is the age that's coming on, and since the time of Christ we've been in the Piscean age, and the one that would go before that is the Aryan age, and the one before that would be the age of Gemini. So the age of Gemini would be, I missed one. Taurus? No, I said Taurus. Aries, Taurus. Anyway, if you go back enough time, you get to the Gemini age, the age of twins. And this idea of twinning and doubling and repeating and inversions and so forth works out throughout this whole silly thing. So this is paleontology. Now is twin time. It's about 8,000 years back in the calendrical present. No one thinks about colonial adventures. Jaguars lord it over men. Red ceramic ware with extravagant markings show little figurines of women with 6 fingers. Lattices are worked by secret giants. Violet herself is the earth, the whole cosmos, actually. Change comes in elegant twists. There are towers in the future. Change itself is the earth, a field of thaumaturgical violets. Hammerhead is excluded from the camp or made chief in the form of a thumpkin. He makes speeches, but his feet are forbidden from touching the ground. There is small use for him. But to keep others of a like disposition from coming to realize their nature by holding sway. In Africa, a sociality whose moieties are differentiated by the rattles they propagate. Everyone lives in a queer new old hotel, red mud mostly. Then change comes in from who knows whither. Everyone wants his colony across the small sea. The lattice orders a duplication of space. There's a zoo in the common plaza. African rattles everywhere, otherwhere than Africa. Hammerhead has offices, auspices, and forges in old hotels and mountain fastnesses. He sets up a channel to communicate with jaguars. African rattles diversify. Some are trumpets, some are glockenspiels, some bassoons. Violet herself can turn up as a lattice. Jaguar studies Malay. He studies the tower that appeared one afternoon, providing the island with a center different from fields rich in violets. An intricate tune from a clever bassoon expressed a new sense of cosmos. The age of the twin is long finished, but trumpets and glockenspiels propagate its qualities even now. Eggs are hatched for the music that gestates inside them. Hammerhead manufactures everything that constitutes a world in the many chambers of the turning tower. Black Lake's not only black, not only a lake. Music makes space. Jaguar observes and considers. If Hammerhead and his diminutive avatars comprise the entire population so that there is nothing but him, I'll build an old hotel and stock it with violets. We are his colony, I can see that. But is there no reason of Black Lake other than black vats of coolants? Are there no uses for music other than to furnish insignia to mark off the space? I, for one, can see a crystal forming in the mist as morning comes. It is a door to an infinite elsewhere, right in the midst of contingency's consistency. A universe of versatile jaguars, jaguars who are not only jaguars, but thaumaturgical violets come anew. Black Lake is a source for such music. It cannot be diverted for use. There was a twist in his attitude, as if a ventriloquist had commandeered his vocal apparatus, and though the things he was saying were things he might well have been saying, still, it is as if a company of elfin intentionalities were collectively composing a music, and there was a gigantic egg on the other side of the door, no matter which door was chosen. Music was not only violets when the lattice is plucked from ventriloquial spaces, a dapper bassoon at the head of a legion of spiders, a glockenspiel army of weirdlings, and in the end, an African rattle in the hand of a silent wrench boy who has spent the age and its transform alone at Black Lake. Okay, I stop. Three.